So speaking, speaking is a great paper. The reason it is so great is because the whole thing only takes 15-20 minutes. But this 15-20 minutes can take up 25% of your whole score. So if you can do well in this paper, it's actually such an amazing deal if you think about points per minute. So it's still a little bit early. I think we should wait a few more minutes, 2-3 minutes max, for a few more people to log in. So meanwhile, if you have any questions about the IELTS paper, if you have tried it before, for example, and then you think something is difficult, something that you don't know about, feel free to ask us that question in the chats, and then I will answer everything as I see them. So let's see. Good. We have a few more people who just joined. So let's just get started. So IELTS speaking. Today, we are mainly talking about 3 things. The first and maybe most important thing, I want to talk to you about how the exam is actually scored, graded, the whole thing from the examiner, the teacher, my point of view. And then after that, that brings us to the key tips. Anything you should think about, you should pay attention to in order to get a high score. And then finally, we should have a lot of time left over for me to do maybe two practice papers with you, hopefully. All right, so let's start by thinking about how the IELTS is actually organized, how it is run. So I don't know if all of you have taken an IELTS exam before already, but if you haven't, this is what you need to know. Very often, an IELTS examination takes place in sometimes a strange location. In some countries, they do it in a kind of normal office setting with little exam rooms that you walk inside, very normal. But in other places, the companies that own IELTS, so British Council and IDP Australia, they don't actually have the space. So what happens is they actually have to rent a space, rented exam spaces. So it can be something like a hotel. It can be at a conference hall. It can be anything. So what that means is, it means that time is super important. If they go over time, they lose the room. Now, this is more important than you think. Now, when you do an examination at your own school, for example, and your teacher is very friendly, if they want, they can easily give you a few more minutes just to finish what you are talking about, just to ask you a few more questions to help you a little bit. But with IELTS, that cannot happen. That means they will cut you off. Like, it's actually quite rude and sometimes quite surprising, but they will totally cut you off. So now I take the IELTS every 2 years just to practice and just to prepare myself. And then every time when I am speaking, they will suddenly say, thank you, that's enough. Or just say, without warning, the next question. So they will easily cut you off, and that is not a problem, not a bad thing. So you don't have to be worried if they suddenly cut you off. That is just a question of their time. Especially, I think you guys in this group will probably be taking the IELTS in a few months. And that is usually a high season when everybody at your age, everybody is trying to go travel. So there will be a lot of people and then they just don't have the time. So the first thing to remember, they will cut you off, and that's not a problem. Sometimes it is a good thing because it means you have given them more than enough for them to give you a score. So they will cut you off. Secondly, your points do not matter. Now, this is something that we will talk about later. The IELTS questions are usually about your school, maybe sometimes your work, and your own life, the places where you live, the city that you live in. So you have to think. These type of examiners, and then they are asking you questions about, oh, where do you go to school? Or what do you like to do on Saturdays and Sundays? Do you think they actually care what you do? Of course not. Your points do not matter. Just tell a good story. It does not have to be true, okay? And I will give you some examples about this later. Now, finally, and this is the part people usually have a problem with, so it feels like a friendly chat when you move in. So the IELTS examiners, they are really good people, and then sometimes they will smile at you, and then they will make you feel a little bit more relaxed and comfortable so that it's like a friendly chat. But of course, it is not a friendly chat. It is an exam. So, but you still have to show off your language, show off your vocab, and show off any linking words, any other skills you have. So, okay. Now, let's take a step back and think about, well, what is the IELTS speaking paper? Now, I have this paper, which is from IDP, one of the companies that own the IELTS. And then this is a very official paper. So the IELTS paper is divided into 3 parts. And then just like writing and just like reading, part 1 is the easiest, and then part 2 is a little bit more difficult, and then part 3 is the hardest. Now, IELTS paper, they always get more and more difficult the longer you go into it. So part 1, this is the easy section. So what is the easy section? The easy section is all about, give me a second. The easy section is all about simple information about your life. Okay, so it's usually something about your hometown, your school, or maybe, because of course office is also possible because adults, university students also take IELTS. They ask you about your hometown, your office, and then they would also ask about your friends and your hobbies. The idea here, what they want to do is that you no need to think of new points. Just tell, new points, and you can just tell the truth. That is the idea behind it. So let's look at these questions here. On the left, in the middle of the screen. So let's talk about your hometown or village. What kind of a place is it? What's the most important, most interesting part? What do people do? And if it is a good place to live. So there are 4 questions here, as we can see, but actually you don't have to answer all 4. Sometimes the examiner, if they think you are good enough, if they think you are okay, maybe they will just let you answer longer for just 1 or 2 questions. And then they don't need to ask everything because in total, there are 8, which is quite a lot. Or sometimes if you cannot say enough, if you stop very early, then of course they will try to ask you more questions, or maybe they would even ask you a follow-up question. Like here, would you say it is a good place? Yes, I think it is very good. Dead air. And then they will say, why is it a good place to live? So at this point, the key is to just tell the truth. Don't overthink it. The most important thing here is to show off your vocab and linking and your linking words. What do I mean by that? Linking words such as firstly, secondly, thirdly, or maybe on one hand, on the other hand, or maybe something like however, furthermore, and this type of linking words help a lot when you are trying to get a good score. So another common question is what to say and how long to say. And there is no good answer for this. So if you look at the official examination tips from IELTS, from British Council and IDP, they will say, oh, don't worry about the time limit. Just talk freely. This is supposed to be a casual conversation. Now, of course, we cannot trust that. This is an exam. So usually you answer for 1 to 2 minutes, okay? And then in 1 to 2 minutes, you talk about 1 to 2 points or examples. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's look at this question. What kind of a place is it? My hometown or village? So, of course, if I am answering this question, I would say Hong Kong because that's where I am. I am in Hong Kong right now. So I have to think about 2 things to say about Hong Kong. And then for each point, I would talk to about 1 to 2 minutes. So if you break it down, let's say I would have maybe 30 to 40 seconds on the first point, and then another 30 to 40 first point, and then another 30 to 36 on the second point, and then finally about 10 seconds, maybe even shorter. Wrap up. So I'll give you a quick and short example, just using this first question. So what happens? I am the student. I will walk into the room. And then when I walk into the room, I will have one person sitting in front of me. And then next to the person, usually there are some cameras pointing at you because they want to make sure that the exam is fair. So everything is recorded. And then sometimes there will also be a microphone just in front. And then at that point, the examiner will ask you for your ID card. So you have to very nicely give them your ID card, say thank you very much. And then after that, they will say, do you agree to be recorded for this exam? So of course you have to say yes, because if you don't agree to be recorded, then there is no exam. After that, finally, they will start. Now, the examiner will not tell you that we will now do part 1, introduction and interview. There is nothing like that. They will just suddenly say, let's talk about your hometown or village. And then you cannot see a timer, and then you don't know what part this is. So in fact, I have some students, I can share a story of a student who went to an exam without preparing, just no lessons, no exercises, just no preparation. And then after this student, it was a girl, after this student finished all the examination and then she came out, she actually did not know how many parts there are in the IELTS speaking. And the reason is that is nobody tells you and you don't know the time. Somebody just suddenly asks you, let's talk about your hometown or village, and then you go. So how would I answer this question? There is no preparation time. So I would follow this advice and just tell the truth. And then I would use a lot of deep descriptions to try to create more vocabs. I will say, all right, what kind of a place is it? I will say, so my hometown is Hong Kong, and it is a pretty large city that although there is not so much land, we have a lot of water and a lot of people. So we are on the first point, by the way. So when you come to Hong Kong, the first thing that you will see is definitely all the tall buildings everywhere. As I said, we are a city that has mostly mountains and also mostly water. So if there is flat land, that is very rare, very special, and then developers have to build very tall buildings. So in fact, I myself live on the 36th floor of the building. I know it's quite high compared to some other countries, but in Hong Kong, it's just normal. Another thing that people should know about Hong Kong is that we are a city that loves food and shopping. So many people come to Hong Kong for shopping and for food because we are in a location that is quite easy to fly to. And then when people come here, they can eat many different kinds of food that they want. We have Japanese, Korean, Thai, we have spicy, we have not spicy, we have desserts, we have soups, we have everything. Although I think that in some places, if you go to Tokyo, if you go to Paris, the quality might be a little bit higher. Hong Kong is pretty good as well. So that is the type of place that Hong Kong is. We are a city that has a lot of mountains and water, and we are also a city with great food and great shopping, right? So what I have done, by the way, is I have stuck to something quite simple. So if you know anything about your city, right, it's fine. Even though it feels like a slightly stupid point, nobody cares. Even if it is very obvious, nobody cares. The important thing is that you show your structure and that you show your vocabulary. And then after that, they will continue, and then at some point they will cut you off, but as we said, that's okay. And then if there is enough time, they will skip on. Let's move on to talk about accommodation. So tell me about the kind of accommodation you live in. So now, this brings out a very important point. Sometimes they will use a word that you don't know here, accommodation. Accommodation means your home, the place you live. But if you don't know what accommodation means, what do, right? So actually, the answer is simple. You just say, excuse me, what do you mean by accommodation? Just ask. It's totally okay. So, right? So it's totally okay to say something like, excuse me, what do you mean by accommodation? Now, the reason this is a good idea is because you have two choices, right? The first choice is you ask a question like I told you to, or the other choice is you just try to make up something, try to pretend you understand. And that has interesting meanings when it comes to the scoring. If your answer is off topic, then the highest you can get is a 3. 3 out of 9. So that is a very bad score. You don't want to go off topic. That means if you don't know something, just ask, excuse me, what do you mean by accommodation? And then they will explain it a little, and then they will continue. Or maybe another situation, they are speaking maybe quite quickly, or maybe you are nervous, you did not pay attention, and then you just don't know what happened. And then you can just say, excuse me, can you repeat that? Just simply, politely ask for more information, and then they will give it to you. It's completely fine. It is possible that you will get like a teeny, tiny penalty, a mark down because of this, but it is so much better than the other choice, which is 3. So now, this is a quick overview of part 1. I want to skip on to part 2 first, because a nice thing about part 2 and part 1 is that they have similar to part 1, but have prep time. So this is section 2. It's similar, but they give you 1 minute to prepare and 2 minutes to talk. Now, this one, again, we go back to this kind of stupid, difficult point about IELTS. So they say there is a time limit, but they don't let you look at the time. You don't actually know how much time you have to prepare. That is quite difficult. And the only real solution to prepare for this is you have to practice a lot. There is no other choice. You have to get a feel for yourself. Oh, in 1 minute or 2 minutes, how many points do I make? How many preparation can I do? And then you have to time yourself. Everybody is different. Someone may be able to write a lot in 1 minute, or maybe someone else is slower. You have to find out for yourself. So, must practice to find out how fast you can work. All right, so that's something that you have to do. But otherwise, happily, the skill in part 2 is kind of the same as part 1. You just have to tell the truth, right? And then tell the truth, show off vocab, and then use linking words. Same as any other exam. So at this point, you might notice, but wait a moment, Joseph. There's this card. What is this? What's happening? So this is the difference between part 2 and part 1. Part 2 is a little bit more difficult because they give you this task card. You see, candidate, that's you, task card. And then you have to prepare for 1 minute and then talk to 2 minutes. Now, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are usually 3 to 4 bullet points here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you have to talk about all 4. If you forget something, that's bad. That is not as bad as going off topic, but it is close. You do not want to miss something. So we have 4 points, and then you have to talk for 2 minutes. So the answer is clear, right? The answer is about 30 seconds per bullet point, or just per point. This is what you have to do. They give you 4 things and you spend about 30 seconds per point. Most of the time, it means about 3-4 sentences per bullet point. Right? It's actually not as much as you think. So now, well, this is all very theoretical, so let's just do one. Let's just look at one. So we have this. Describe something you own, which is very important to you. So what type of a thing can I say, right? And the answer is anything. It can be stupid, it can be silly, it does not matter. For example, if you want it to be, actually, let's pause a little bit. What would you say if someone asked you this question, right? If I asked you to talk about something that is important to you, right? What would it be? So I'll give you guys a few seconds, 1 minute. So just type it very quickly in the chat. What is the thing you own, which is very important to you? So just type out the answer first, and then later on, I might ask some of you to just try it. But right now, can you give us some examples? So let's see. What is something that's important to you? Right? Tell us in the chat. So let's see. What is it? It can be anything. For me, I might say something that's very important to me might be my phone, like my phone, maybe. What else is very important? If you want to go in a different direction, not so much about technology, how about you can say my glasses, right? Without my glasses, I cannot see. What else would be good? It can be anything you want. It can be a book. It can be a gift. It can be a shirt. Oops. Where did it go? Okay. It can be a shirt, an item of clothing. It can be shoes. It can be anything. Oh, dog. That's actually a good one. A cat, a dog, a pet. Right? So these are all possible answers. And the thing you should remember is you can all get the same score, same point, whichever one you pick, because the topic is not important. It is how you explain it. So once you have this, the next step is how do you tick all 4 boxes, right? So an easy way to think about it is just answer it in complete sentences. So let's say a dog. So yes, I did used to have a dog. She was the love of my life. I've never loved anything more than my dog, ... And then you can say, oh, I got my dog from a pet shelter that I help with. Or you can say, oh, I got my dog from a pet shop that... Or maybe I got my dog because a friend's dog gave birth to puppies and then they were asking for people. Or maybe you can say, I just rescued my dog on the street. One day we were walking home and then we found a tiny puppy and then we decided to save her, ... It doesn't have to be true. It is okay to tell a lie as long as you are good at lying. Because who is going to know, right? The examiner cannot check. This is how you got it from. And then how long have you had it? Again, anything. Oh, I've only had my dog for 3 months. He is still a puppy. And then right now we are still planning, trying to teach it toilet training, potty training, and so on. Or, oh, I have had my dog for 15 years. My dog has grown up with me and my family. We love the dog very much, ... Doesn't matter. And then you want to use a linking word. What I use it for is we just take it out for walks, or maybe we use it to guard our home, or maybe we use it as just a friend to talk to, ... right? And then finally, why it's important, because I love it, because it saved my life, because it helps me relax, anything. So at this point, I'm going to show you this one. Here. Now, so after this lesson, I am going to send you this sheet, which is a sheet of linking words that you can use and you should use to create your answer. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's look at an example. Let's say I am trying to answer where you got it from. Here, the whole thing actually. This is how I would use it. So we used the dog already, so now let's use maybe my phone. So you can say something that I own and which is very important to me is my iPhone. So here, I got my iPhone as a gift from my parents for my birthday. It was a very special day. We went to the Apple store and then we picked out the favorite color I like, which was just red. Now, at this point, I have to switch, I have to turn between the first bullet point and then the second bullet point. So, how do I do it? I need to use a linking word from here. So maybe an easy one would be here, right? So I was saying that we went to an Apple store. I picked out my favorite color, which is red. Also, or maybe so, or thus, or here, if you see my highlights on the right-hand side. So I have had it for about 2 years. And then it was a great 2 years because it was a big upgrade compared to my last phone. And then I can use it to take pictures, ... Doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you use these type of a linking word. So how about from here to here? It doesn't really matter again, as long as you use one. So I have had my phone for about 2 years now, and it has been amazing. Here, right? In most cases, comma, I use it for ... Or maybe here. For the most part, comma, I use it for ... Or usually, typically, mainly, or even, for example, I use it for reading news on the internet. And then you can say something like, oh, every morning when I go to school, I have to take the train, the metro for half an hour, for an hour, and that is a very good time to read the news, read ebooks, etc., etc. So now, finally here, explain why it is important to me. So I'm trying to switch from this point to this point. how do I want to do the link? So finally, I want a link that is about conclusions, right? So if you see here, concluding information. So concluding information, and I would say, in summary, my phone is very important to me because, or on the whole, my iPhone is important to me because, or therefore, ultimately, in short, to conclude, my iPhone is important to me because ... right? That's what we want. So now at this point, I just want to talk about a different common question, which is, oh my God, it's just a stupid phone. How can I talk about the phone for 2 minutes? Isn't that quite a lot? And the solution to it is to give details. You can give details about what it looks like, right? Color, shape, size. You can talk about what it feels like, maybe cold, hot, or maybe hard, soft. And then you can talk about any other sort of description that you can have with this. So for example, this one, I look at this, and then maybe I would say, oh, the thing that I have, which is very important for me, is my iPhone 10 or iPhone X. It is in a red case, so I'm talking about color. It's in a red case, it's kind of a rounded rectangle shape, and it is made of steel and glass, although the case I have on it is a type of plastic, ... So it feels quite heavy when I hold it in my hands, and then ... right? Or maybe when you talk about a cat, just tell me, oh, the cat that I have is a normal British short hair cat. It is about 1 foot long, 2 feet long. It weighs about 10 pounds, 8 pounds, I don't know. And it's ginger, it's gray, it's black, it's white. Okay, so my cat has very soft hair because she likes to clean herself all the time, ... right? So it's all about giving these type of details. All right, let's move on. Oh, sorry, before we move on, here. After you finish talking for 1 to 2 minutes, your examiner might ask you 1 or 2 follow-up questions. Now that's usually useful if you have made a mistake maybe, and then your examiner wants to rescue you and then give you an example, give you a chance, an opportunity to say something more. So just use it, keep it simple. These type of rounding up questions should be shorter than 30 seconds. Keep it short, to the point, no need to feel too stressed about it. Finally, we move on to part 3. Part 3, this is the boss fight. This is the most difficult part. This is the most difficult part. After the kind of rounding off questions that the examiner used to wrap up to finish part 2, now we have the final real discussion. Now, the idea behind part 3 is that you cannot prepare for this. The idea here is that you have a real conversation with a real English speaker, and then there's no way to cheat. I'm afraid to say, you just have to tell the truth and do the best you can. So, look at this question. Let's consider first how people's values have changed. So you will notice, the first thing you notice is not like 1 and 2. not just facts, more about how you feel, right? They care about your opinions. So at this point, you have to say something real now. It's not something you can so easily lie or make up things about. But the nice thing about it is you answer and then follow up question, answer again, follow up again, ... And then the direction can actually go everywhere. Okay, so rounding off questions. I'll just go a bit deeper into that. Quick question. Rounding off is just a conclusion, just to close off. So you can think of it as saying, rounding off. It's kind of finishing questions or ending questions for part 2. Yeah. So the idea of round off, it means that to round off something is to finish something, is to end something. So that's what rounding off questions mean. Thank you for the question, by the way. Yeah. I'm very tempted to pronounce your name, but then I'm sure I will butcher it. So I'm afraid, yes, I'll just say thank you for the question. All right, back to here. What kind of things give status to people in your country? And then for this part, you don't have to answer long questions. It's not like part 1, not like part 2, where you just have to keep talking, keep talking, keep talking. In here, maybe you should target answers about 30 to 40 seconds long, and then give the examiner a chance to ask questions and then to answer again. So for example, let's say, examiner, student. So what kind of things give status to people in your country? Oh, many things give status to people in my country, but most importantly, people care about money, wealth, and people also care about education and whether they have done something to help the community. Oh, what do you mean by doing something to help the community? Oh, for example, my country really respects people who sacrifices their own time or their own energy to help other people by giving them food, by teaching them, or by just helping people who don't have money, who are poor. Can you give me an example of that? Sure, there is this food bank charity that collects food from supermarkets and other people and then gives them to poor families who don't have enough to eat, ... right? So this type of questions, they can go everywhere. There is no fixed direction. We don't know how it goes, simply because there is no guessing how the discussion is going to go. But the beautiful thing about this part is you cannot really go off topic, right? Because everything just goes normally, so it doesn't matter. And then at some point, if you stop having new things to say, and then they would just talk about, oh, have things changed since your parents' time? And then again, there's no correct answer. You just say, yes, I think things have changed a lot since my parents' time. A long time ago, people who have status are people who have connections to the government, who have strong connections with big businesses. But then nowadays, celebrities, YouTubers, even Twitch streamers, gamers, also have very high status and that is very different. And then, oh, let's say the examiner has nothing to say. So they will say, okay, thank you very much. Finally, let's talk about the role of advertising. Do you think advertising influences what people buy? And then and then you just keep going on. So in this type of two-way discussion, there is really no good way to practice by yourself. The best way to do it is to practice with a person. So actually, I'm going to give maybe one or two people here a chance. If you want to practice with me as an example, right? Just give us a wave, say hello in the chat, and then we can do a simple, casual, low risk, very safe practice together. Otherwise, meanwhile, let's come back up to task 1 and task 2, and then I will just keep giving you examples until the end. So let's see. We're running out of space. I will zoom out a little. That's fine. Yeah. Okay, so let's say I want to talk about, let's say we are talking about accommodation. Because we talked about this part a little bit. So now let's move on. Let's go next to here. And then we can say, oh, the examiner again. Let's move on to talk about accommodation. I wish I had a sock or something. That would have been useful. Let's talk about accommodation. Tell me about the kind of accommodation that you live in. Oh, the kind of accommodation I live in is nothing special. Like most people in Hong Kong, I live in an apartment. So as I said before, land is very scarce. We don't have enough land in Hong Kong. Therefore, buildings have to be tall, and then people live in apartments rather than the houses with gardens that people may have in the other places. The building I live in is, again, nothing special. I think it's a little bit old. It's about 30 to 40 years old. But it's clean, it's safe, and it is very close to a metro station, so I love it a lot. Doesn't matter. How long have you lived there? I have lived at my current apartment for about 2 years now. Before this, I was living, I don't even know. Before this, I was living at the university, in the university's halls accommodation, but since I graduated and started working in the city, I moved into my own apartment. What do you like about living there? Oh, the thing that I love the most about living in my apartment is that it is in a great location. Very, very quickly, from maybe leaving my home for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, I can already get to lots of different convenience stores, restaurants, and shops all around me. So everything is near and close by. Also, I like that my apartment is quite quiet. So even though I'm in the city, because I face an inside street, I don't hear so much noise from the road. Oh, what sort of accommodation would you most like to live in? The type of accommodation that I would most like to live in is probably the same type of apartment, but bigger. I know that many people would like to live in a house with a garden and then lots of more space. But actually, those kind of places are too far away from the city, and that is not good for me. That's not what I want. Maybe I would like an accommodation with a rooftop so that I can barbecue with my friends. But actually, I think the type of accommodation I have today is already quite similar to what I would most like to live in. And then, okay, and then they would just move on to part two, and then you just go. So part one is really quite casual. You really don't have to overthink it. It doesn't have to be true. I will give you a version two that has lying involved. And then like the point is that it doesn't have to be true as long as it is a good answer. So let's move on to talk about accommodation. Tell me, what kind of accommodation do you live in? Oh, I live in a faraway rural village with my family in a house, and then we have a little garden. It's a little bit far away from everything, but we have a lot of space. There are trees around us, and it is, I guess, what people would call the suburbs, the suburban areas. Oh, how long have you lived there? Oh, my family and I have lived at our house for generations, so it must be at least 40, 50 years. Me personally, I have lived there since I was born, so I have lived in my house for already 16 years because clearly I'm 16 years old. So 16 years from when I was born and all through elementary school, junior high school, and now I'm still in the same place. What do you like about living there? My favorite thing about my house, my family home, is the space. There is a big garden right outside so that on a hot summer day, we can just sit outside and get a suntan, or maybe I can run outside with my dogs and then we have a lot of fun. Who knows? Like, what sort of accommodation would you most like to live in? I think, even though I really love the house I'm living in right now, I would still like to try to live inside the city. When I go to university and when I have to leave home, I will have to move away. And I think at that time, I want to be close to my friends and I want to be close to shops and restaurants and other places. So I think when I leave home, it would be great if I can live at school or live at an apartment with my classmates, with my friends, and then we can have a lot of fun. Okay, so that's the type of stuff that part one is about. So part two is basically the same thing, but as we said here, there is some prep time. Oh, by the way, so I'm checking the time. There is a bit of time left. So if anybody has final questions or any sort of tips or any sort of areas they want to ask me about, now is the last time. So part two, what is happening in part two? So part two, you have 1 minute to prepare. So when preparing, you have 1 minute. What would you write down? So what you should write down is write down good vocabs. This is what you want, good vocabs. Because in 1 minute, it's a very short time, you're actually not going to have a chance to write a full sentence, right? It's just not possible. Like 1 minute, how many sentences can you write? All you can do is to write words. So for this one, maybe, what kind of a thing I would write? I would write something I own that is very important to me. I would say it is a t-shirt. Sports team shirt. Maybe I would say important memory. Maybe we can say something like it's an old shirt from elementary or primary school, and we can say that it's kind of a running track team, and then we can say that it's after final race, we signed names on everyone's shirts. So here, yeah. So the point is, I am not writing sentences. I am writing vocabs. I'm writing keywords that I want to use so that later when we do the exam, we are not actually trying to think of good vocabs at the same time. So that's number one. Number two, some other people just like to think about connecting words. So also, furthermore, however, what is more, like on the contrary, or in conclusion, or since, thus, for, then, show, anything. The point is that you prepare yourself, you make it easier to have something so that later on in the exam, when you have that little card to look at, because like they actually give you a little card and a piece of paper to write, you can just look at the keywords, make them big, easy to read, and that's all you need. So in these final minutes, I just want to talk about how should you prepare for this. So now, I think there are two things you can do. The first thing is actually if you go to YouTube and just search for IELTS speaking examples, there is quite a lot of examples you can look for. And then if you want, you might even try to find people in your country. Like if you're Japanese, find a Japanese example. If you're from Indonesia, find an Indonesian example, so that you see what people like you would say or talk about in the exam. So one, watch some YouTube videos. And then tip number two is part three, you definitely cannot practice because you need two people and then you don't know what someone is talking about. But part one and part two, you can totally prepare by yourself. If I were you, you can either buy a book or actually these topics are very easy to find online. Again, just go to Google and say IELTS speaking paper examples. And then you will see all sorts of questions, and all you have to do is just look at the example, right? Imagine what you will say when someone asks you this question. If you have a list like that, what kind of a place is it? Just lock yourself in a room, lock yourself in the toilet, and then just talk to yourself. Talk into your mirror. Actually, if you have a cat or a dog, it's an excellent idea to talk to your dog or cat, or maybe if you have baby, sister, brother, anything. Just talk to someone, talk to a doll, right? Talk to anybody, and just keep practicing until you feel like the topics are more or less the same, because this is the key point. The topics are more or less the same. They repeat a lot, right? They would ask, they would change the question a little bit. So for example, what kind of a place is it will become where do you live? But the basic idea is really the same. If you prepare enough, you will start to see, oh, I did this one. Oh, I did this one. So that's a top tip. And I hope you guys can practice by yourself. So anyway, that's it. That's time now from me. So once again, happy talking to you from Hong Kong and have a happy weekend. Bye bye.